my desk is totally misarranged, but it's time. It's daily time. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Day 9 Daily number 476, where we learn to be a better gamer. Come on, camera, work with me. Come on, camera. Excellent. Or, of course, we could do the Blair Witch chase cam. Quickly, I need to do the daily. Oh, that's right. I care about your inner ear. I don't want you puking mid-show. As many of you, I'm sure, did during the Blair Witch Project. In today's Day 9 Daily, after we're done talking about nonsense, we're going to be looking at an excellent Zerg vs. Protoss game by LiquidRet, where he does a really clean, clear Mutalisk play. Interestingly, though, we're going to have somewhat of an odd structure to the daily, so I want to tell you right now so that you may skip part 1 if you so desire. In part number 1, what we're going to do is talk about the general idea of transitioning and why it causes a lot of problems in our gameplay. A transition is basically going from one unit mix to another unit mix, or from one stage of the game to the next. So something like, I'm building a lot of roaches, I'm going to transition to mutalisks. Oh, I've been doing a lot of aggression, I'm going to transition to defending and expanding. That sort of thing. We're going to talk about these concepts and show why it causes so many problems. We're going to look at a game where LiquidRet actually played quite well, but the transition was a little bumpy, and we see that the transition points are always the weak links in our play. And then in parts 2 and 3, what we're going to do is we're going to look at a game from LiquidRet where he does a magnificent job of transitioning into Mutalisks, which can be quite a difficult thing to pop into, but more importantly, it's a very difficult thing to pop out of. A lot of people just start going Ling Mutalisk and then they never stop, ever, under any circumstance, ever! So we'll talk about that in parts 2 and 3, how to get out of that. So let's go ahead and go on to part 1, and let me just talk about something that I think is very personal to me. It's very personal. Okay, so I've been weighing myself somewhat regularly over the last several months, and I'm kind of cruising at 222. The weight never seems to go up or down that much, it just sort of chills at 222. Now note that I am 6'3", that's 191 centimeters, or 75 inches, which means that I am about 3 pounds per inch. Just some data on me. But there's this test that you can always do to determine if you weigh too much. I'm actually going to tilt the camera down a little bit. So I sit up straight, but when I slouch, yeah, this happens. Yeah. I'm sure you have a shirt like this, where this goes on. Yeah, you know what this means? It means you have to lose a little bit of weight if your shirt is buckling like this. So what you don't actually see is that it buckles all the way down to the rest of my torso. So I've started to eat a lot healthier. I'm back to my largely greens diet, and I'm continuing to drink a lot of coffee. So you know what? Go me. Oh, I'm also going to break my neck and hope that loses the weight after I lose nerve endings and all the parts that hurt when I don't eat. Alright, let's talk about that transitioning. Oh, also, I'm going to try to keep the segments a little shorter, like 15 to 20 minutes instead of 20 to 25 minutes. So, without any further ado, let's go into this game where I have the sound enabled. So, what I want to emphasize is LiquidRet's transitioning in this game. Now, we're not going to be hiding that much. I'm going to tell you straight off the bat, LiquidRet is going to try to go for the Stefano-style Roach Ling play. Oh, by the way, these are from the Summer Dream Hack that just concluded, and I, as you might imagine, downloaded all my reps from sc2rep.ru. I'm dying. Ah, excellent. So LiquidRet is going to be opening up, expanding, and expanding. And then he's going to go Roach Ling in that Stefano-esque style, and then he's going to go for Infestors and eventually Broodlords. Did you hear 4 distinct transitions in there? Well, if you weren't even trying to listen for transitions, let me emphasize that this part 1 is all about thinking in terms of transitions. 4. There was the expanding that we were doing at the start, and then the transition into starting to get Roach Ling for defense. Then there was the emphasis on economy transitioning into big Roach Ling aggression. Then we transition into stopping and getting infestors. And then we transition into a hive, getting guardians. Broodlords. Fuck, I wish I had guardians. Oh, God. I don't care what you say. Guardians are better than broodlords. So, those are the big 4 ones right there. And it's important that we say these out loud because I will argue that your weak point always is when you are transitioning. That is always the biggest weak spot, is the transition. So let me just speed this up, and we'll talk about some obvious stuff. So LiquidRet expands once. He's anticipating his opponent will early expand. Ret does this. If you scout, that's fine. Ret just kind of assumes that his opponent is going for an early expand. So, here we go. We are on phase 1 of our build, and then we're just going to drone, 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 drone. And interestingly, in the early days of yore in StarCraft 2, people would struggle with this moment right now. What is the difficulty of the transition right now? The difficulty is knowing when do I stop making drones and start making units. Again, it's not that complicated, right? It's just, I'm building drones and now I'm not building drones. It's the transition and doing something different. But still, this is an interesting question. Do I do it at 40, 50, 60 food? Do I do it right now at 32? This gave people a lot of trouble, and why people would say that ZvP was quite difficult because there were too many openings for Protoss, and it was too difficult for Zerg to handle. And that's just because Zerg had were doing bad jobs of transitioning in these spots. But now most Zergs are starting to get comfortable with this idea of double gassing at 6 minutes. Going for the Roach Warren and Evolution Chamber around 7-ish. All the while building drones, where 7 minutes, bang, 7 minutes. LiquidRet, don't disappoint us, no. Yeah, there it is. There's the Roach Warren and the Evo Chamber, right at 7 minutes. So we're seeing some pretty basic transitions go on right now. This is a good transition. This is... And I don't want to... I want to note that it's not quite that Ret was playing and went, aha, I have found the transition time. Instead, this is the entire StarCraft community has researched this matchup for 2 years and have kind of discovered that this is the correct way to transition safely here. So this is kind of like a pre-set-up thing. Only little difference is, okay, we can do some clever things with the transition where we're actually building the layer before we start these two. Oh, maybe we'll build these two before we build the layer? Well, that's just an interesting question. There's 2 different possibilities there, but that's a highly refined kind of thing. So everything I've talked about has largely been StarCraft community research has determined that this makes you safe against Protoss. So here's phase 3, right? We are starting now to go into this big Roach Ling offense. This is exactly what Stefano does. Or I should say did, until he's been playing around with his gameplay a little bit more. Sasse's doing kind of a typical fast third base on Metropolis. Ret's trying to pick things off, trying to do some kind of... Actually, I'll back it up just a little bit. Trying to waste some force field, do some kind of damage. But now, all of a sudden, we're at an interesting spot in LiquidRet's shoes. We have one of 2 options, and it is only 2. Do we stay in our current phase or transition to the next thing? And this is why I emphasize the idea of game plans so much. It's not, you build your infestation pit at 29 food or whatever. God, that's a really early infestation pit. It's not this exact timing. In situations like this, often it's correct to look at this and say, no, you know what? I'm just going to go absolutely apeshit with Roach Ling and kill you off. That is the play that I'm going to make. A lot of times you want to say, whoa, I'm totally stopping with this Roach Ling. And I'm going to do something different. And this is what we see Ret end up doing. He's built some roaches, but suddenly he builds all his gas geysers that he's missing. And is now transitioning to this infestation pit. This is where I actually want to stop and do some thought about, well, what do we do now? What's so significant about this transition period? Quite simply, an infestation pit is 50 seconds to build, and then it's 80 seconds before you get the pathogen glands upgrade done. In other words, it's about 2 minutes from the moment you decide to go infester to the moment the infestation pit is done and you have infestors with energy out. So there's a 2-minute window where you have to be aware of being on the defensive. So for instance, right here, how do we defend ourselves during this transitionary period for the next 2 minutes? Or another way to state it, how do we get to 12 minutes and 30 seconds safely? Well, we have a number of options. And notice, once we make that crystal clear statement of 2-minute transition period till I get my shit, we now know that we now know exactly how much time we're buying. A lot of times, if I'm doing a cast, like an MLG or something, I'll say, ooh, wow, he's going to have to make sure he defends himself before that infestation pit comes up. That's sort of the layman's way to say it, but, you know, if you're in a game, you need to get that sort of technical level. What if you are deciding that you want to go for Broodlords? How many seconds is that? There's an important question to ask. We'll be asking it shortly. So Rhett, how does he defend himself during this period? Well, we could do something like flood with spines right now. Rhett is going to do another approach. He's going to flood with roaches and do this sort of aggression. He does have the speed upgrade, as you can see by that yellow 3 there. So there's the infestation pit down. Uh-oh, remember, once we start pathogen glands, we still have to wait about a minute and a half. Alright, cool. So Rhett's just doing these little pokings and proddings. And this can, knowing this 2-minute time, is now going to help so much in LiquidRet's shoes because he knows, do I want to commit here? Do I want to not commit here? Well, no, it's quite clear we don't want to commit. We just want, in fact, splitting up our army and not committing is one of the best options we can do. Coming up here, picking off some sentries, pulling back. Alright, cool. We're getting to the 12-minute and 30-second mark. Alright, now, Rhett is going to be going for Broodlords. Wow, we are really pushing ourselves pretty hard. This is 100 seconds to complete, and a Greater Spire is another 100 seconds to complete. 100 plus 100, you guys, that's freaking 200. It's about 4 minutes of time until you can actually get those Broodlords up. So I just want to note that we started this Spire at around 11 minutes, so 15 minutes is really the period of time that we are claiming we're going to have our awesome stuff up at. So this is where this vulnerable period happens. Notice, oh wow, yeah, 12:30, just as we said, that's when those infestors are really popping out at their earliest. Rhett's still doing this sort of funny business because he wants to buy as much time as possible. There are other techniques of buying time other than harassing, like these spine crawlers. Now, I want to state these spine crawlers in this transitional way. These aren't spine crawlers that we're using to defend to get Broodlords. These are spine crawlers that will buy us 4 total minutes. They're designed to keep us alive for 4 more minutes until we can get the Broodlords out. They're designed to keep us alive until the 15-minute mark. By the way, I just want to note, as you mouse over, I don't know if my logo covers that up, but it's 100 seconds for the Greater Spire, for any of you non-believers. It's really easy to actually, you know what? I'm at fault for this. Me and all my other caster buddies, we're dicks. Let me explain why we're dicks. There's this thing that we do when we're casting where your job as a caster isn't to, like, it's not to show off game knowledge or to make sure that the person there really learns a lot. It's to make sure the viewer experiences the exciting story that is the match. It is a lot more exciting to say something like, wow, he's going to use those spine crawlers to hopefully buy enough time till he gets Broodlords. Do you realize how much hand-wavy language is intentionally thrown in there? Well, he hopefully will have enough time to do that. Let me tell you what technically is correct, but ruins the excitement of the story. Saying something like, he's using these spine crawlers to buy time for exactly 4 minutes, which he should have more than enough of, unless he miscontrols at this point, but he shouldn't because he's good. It's a real mistake that you'll see a lot of commentators make when they'll first start, is they'll just bluntly state, oh yeah, it's fine, he'll save himself with 10 seconds to spare, it's not a big deal. Why did you suck the excitement out of that situation? This actually is a really thin timing for LiquidRet to deal with. And if he messes up, that's actually kind of reasonable because it's so difficult. There is a lot of excitement there. And as a result, oh yeah, I remember, I was explaining why we're dicks. Because this language is so important for conveying what's interesting and cool about the game that a lot of times players will pick up that same language and be using that same language instead of getting specific. Oh yeah, well I'm building spine crawlers to defend and hopefully buy enough time for the Broodlords. No, you're buying the spine crawlers because you're trying to hit the 15-minute mark. 15-minute marks.
Our forces are under attack.
So yeah, we see all the usual jazz coming up. We see the Greater Spire still a little ways away. Takes, I think it's 42 seconds for the Broodlord to morph in, so that's where the 242 second thing comes in. That's where I got 4 minutes from. And you're seeing Rhett still doing these counterattacks. Doing this sort of thing. And it's at this point that we start to really see why these timings are so significant, because Sase is moving forward with a pretty unusual force. 5 Immortals, and not a lot of Blink Stalkers. Well, comparatively to what a lot of other players typically have. So we're getting hit at the 14:30 mark. Notice that this is happening right before 15 minutes. What a frickin' tragedy. Now, if you are in Sase's shoes, you can see that this is an easy way to deduce a timing push. What, he's going for Hive? Well, I guess that must mean he's going for Broodlord, so I guess I should try to hit as close to 15 as I possibly can. And Red, who tries to do this counterattack to buy himself time, it didn't end up working so well. Quelle tragédie. Almost bought enough time. He's at 15 minutes now, but he's been spending all his funds trying to not die. And I don't know if this was shown on camera. I can't remember if I showed it, but our Greater Spire got owned. This is just the most painful thing I think I've ever seen. Oh no, it's up! Yeah, we got it up! We can get Broodlords later. This is awesome! Oh no, the Immortal's on the low ground. Kill it. Okay. So, I'll note that for the rest of the game, as we speed it up, we slowly die in LiquidRet's shoes, despite having all these extra bases up and building all these extra spine crawlers. We slowly die. But you'll note that the key loss period happened in a transition, as we're going for this Greater Spire. Therefore, we need to figure out how to stay alive during this transitionary period. And this is where some of the most clever analysis that you'll see pros do come from. They figure out really smart problems, or they can ask themselves very smart questions and give clever answers to be able to stay alive in these spots. So what I'll note is at the 11-minute mark, we decided to start the Spire, and we decided to start our Hive. Come on, Rhett, don't make me look bad. There it is. Around 11 minutes, we started the Lair and Spire. Excuse me, the Hive and the Spire. What did we see in this period? Well, it seemed like we were able to buy time up until around 13 minutes. At around 13 minutes, it seemed like, wow, you know what? I can't distract him that much anymore. Look at all the distracting going on. Oh, all this painful stuff. We're still doing a pretty good job. Yeah, and this force actually starts to get so big that a little after the 13-minute mark, he just goes for it. What's the correct way to adjust? Well, a little after the 13-minute mark, I didn't really seem to be able to keep him pinned in anymore. Therefore, I need to have a ton of defenses up by a little after that. So that's... I think I'm not doing a good job of explaining that. I'm going to try one more time. When we looked at the replay, we saw that we could keep him pinned back with these counterattacks to around 13 minutes, 13-15. So what that means is, since that's as long as we could do, we need to have our spine crawlers done by around 13:30, and have a lot of them done by around 13:30, and have all the stuff that we need to defend up by 13:30. So in other words, in LiquidRet's shoes, okay, well, if we decide that 11 minutes we're going to start going for this Hive tech, and around 13 we can't do counterattacks to pin him in, then we better have all this stuff done by 1330. What do we see? Here is the weak link in the transition. This is the weak spot. All the mega defense that we need is almost there. A lot of infestors. Some spine crawlers up, but not enough and not in good enough placement. We also don't have any of those. What are they called? We don't have any corruptors up. So that's one clear segment. But the other one that I think is really important to note as well is that at 13 minutes, all these dudes should have pulled all the way back to be able to defend to get up the spire. Because remember, these guys' job only existed till 13 minutes. The rest of the time, they've been unemployed. They need to go back home where there is nice, good work for them up on that healthy Zerg creep. So, what I hope that we've established in part 1 is the idea that Ret did a fairly standard play with a nice opening, nice counterattacks, and a good plan all the way along. And we saw when he died was at this transitionary period. And we talked a little bit about how to fix that transition up and sort of what went wrong with it. In part 2 and 3, what we're going to do is we're going to watch LiquidRet go for Mutaling. We're going to talk about the issues of transitioning with Mutaling and see how Ret solves those, so that way we can go Mutaling oh so effectively. On to part 2, on to part 2. This daily is so good. At least I hope it is. I'm enjoying myself. Yeah.